name is Diane Graves. I am a mediator for the Alternative Disputes Resolutions Unit of the Indiana Civil Rights Commission. A typical workday for me generally starts with a check and perusal of email and voicemail messages to check for any follow-ups on pending cases that have come in since the previous workday and check for any new referrals that might be there. That typically, unless there's something really pressing going on, that's very typical. That does not change. That's generally the first thing that I do. Then I generally turn to any pending settlement agreements which are being drafted, which are currently being drafted, and for any correspondence that's necessary, such as notices of scheduled mediations that need to be sent out. I generally tend to those. Then, if there are no mediation conferences scheduled, I generally start on phone calls, and the phone calls that get priority are generally the cases which are actually under negotiation. There are several forms that a mediation can take, and one of those is just back and forth negotiations by phone, where we don't actually meet with the parties. I just go back and forth between the two in the hopes of negotiating an agreement between them. So I generally start on calls which are in that area, and then from there I go to what we call our cold calls, and those are calls on complaints which have come in, and try to interest complainants and respondents in actually going through the mediation process to see whether we can resolve pending cases without the necessity of a lengthy investigation and or legal process. Then usually later in the afternoon I work on entering any complaints which have come in, any copies of complaints that I've received into my ADR database, which is where I track all of my cases for the month. And that's fairly typical. If I have a mediation conference scheduled, generally we block out about 4 hours for those. They often don't take that long. They have been known to take quite a bit longer than that. So they generally take up a good part of the day. I would say the most enjoyable part of my job is when I actually do help the parties to come to an agreement. There are often cases in which it's obvious that the complainant is hurt and feels that they've been treated unfairly, but at least on the information that I receive, there's not, it doesn't sound like they would, the case would make it in an investigation. It just doesn't sound like there's enough evidence there. It doesn't sound like, it just doesn't sound like it would survive an investigation. And if we're able to help the parties achieve an agreement, then we've helped the respondent get a little bit of understanding as to what the complainant is feeling, and we've also helped the complainant feel like they've gotten some kind of justification for what they went through. So I generally, that's the most enjoyable part, I think. I think that the most challenging part is probably twofold. The most challenging part is, number one, is selling the respondents on the value of mediation. Very often respondents are offended that they were charged in the first place and don't feel like they've done anything wrong. And so, they're not interested in trying to talk about the situation and trying to resolve the matter. And so it takes a little bit of work to convince them to at least listen to the complainant and convince them that they might save themselves at least a great deal of time. No matter which way the case goes, they might save themselves a great deal of time and some legal expense if they try to come up with a resolution that both of them can live with. And on the other side of that coin, you have a complainant which needs to be educated to the limitations of our statute and what it's going to take to prove their case. You know, a lot of times you have a complainant who feels like they may get $200,000 or $300,000 with minimal evidence, and you know that's just not likely to occur. So you have to help them to understand, you know, what our limitations are as well. So that's probably the most challenging. Well, I have been working with the Indiana Civil Rights Commission for it's coming up on 24 years now. It will be 24 years in May. And I came to the commission. I was in a very intense job search at the time. I had a state application in, and I just happened upon the entry in the job bank. I generally came to the commission initially as the front desk receptionist, but civil rights, having been a member of a protected class myself since childhood, civil rights has always been my passion. And so the minute I received the job with the Civil Rights Commission, I felt that it was a place that God wanted me to fulfill my purpose for Him. So I'm very grateful to have received the job. Since coming to the Civil Rights Commission, I have obtained a BS degree in Organizational Communication from Kaplan University, and I'm currently living on the far east side of Indianapolis with my husband, my daughter, and my wonderful granddaughter.